we would be remiss in our duties as hot take machines if we didn't mention the fact that he might have peaked too early.
I don't think he has peaked.
Yeah, I think he's a superhero, isn't he?
Welcome back. No, wait. Welcome back, me.
Welcome back, you.
It's good to be back. Had a little foray into lobster fishing last week. Caught 3 on our last day. Ate them on an island. But it's good to be back with you, Johnny Long.
So what you're saying is catching 3 lobsters isn't enough to pay the bills, so you're coming back to the lucrative world of podcasting.
I mean, have you seen the price of lobster lately? It's not that far off, honestly. As well as Kit Nicholson, welcome to the show.
Hello.
It's good to see you both. We got a lot of Dauphiné to talk about because, frankly, some of the takes that were chucked into the ether on Friday were hilariously wrong. In fact, the commenters on YouTube picked up on this, obviously, because that's the type that will do that. And the fact that I think like hours after that posted, most of those, particularly Dane's takes. Let's talk about Dane.
Well, my take about Remco was right, though. I was quite.
You did,
yeah.
My take about Remco that we learned absolutely nothing about him in the time trial, and that he wasn't going to. I would just pat myself on the head, no, back, for that.
So a self-chapeauing.
Yeah.
Look, in our defence, yes, timings were always going to be our problem, but also we framed it as the knee-jerk reactions because you never guess what. Yeah. But the Tour de France is a different bike race to the Criterium de Dauphiné, and the opposite of what happened at the Dauphiné could happen at the Tour. Anything could happen at any time, and that's not the point of takes. Isn't to be right. The point is to have a take and to defend it until you know.
I am a little bit worried though that I went to my favourite wine shop on at the end of last week and bumped into a chap who I hadn't seen there for a while, but he. We've talked about cycling in Belgium and what have you because they also sell very nice beers. But he asked, and then I realised as I walked away that he'd asked me a slightly garbled question, but I only realised as I walked away that he'd been asking me for betting advice, and I'd said I think that Vingegaard could turn it around for the Tour, and I'm starting to think that was really bad advice. So I apologise to the man whose name I do not know. At the shop I shall not name, just in case. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is this a listener? Is this a friend of the pod?
I very much doubt it.
I like the idea that you have more than one wine shop to have a favourite. I need to get a wine
Edinburgh.
shop.
This is Edinburgh's got fewer wine shops, I suppose. Than in fact, if anybody is local to Edinburgh, they could narrow it down pretty easily.
Okay.
But anyway,
should we get to the Dauphiné? Okay, so who wants to update our dear listeners on what has happened since the last time we came to them, just in case they were not paying attention to the Dauphiné over the weekend?
Well, I can say this thing as I was
on the clock.
On the clock, almost doing it in my sleep because it was fairly easy by the time we got to Sunday afternoon. But by the time, since we last spoke, Tadej Pogacar has put himself on top of the pile quite convincingly. Can you believe it? So on Friday he dropped everyone about 7.5 kilometres from the finish. Vingegaard seemed to let go very quickly, very contentedly, but he lost.
I'm not sure about contentedly.
Well, yes, that's.
There was some gurning.
There was some gurning, but he didn't try too hard. It seemed like there was a slight, maybe a kind of something in his head saying, "Don't go full beans just yet."
Yeah.
Because it was a bit too early. He didn't seem to try too hard. Not that he wasn't trying very hard to begin with, but there's a difference between accelerating to follow Pogacar's infamous acceleration and steady away, only lose a minute rather than 3.
I will say that as somebody who's been dropped plenty of times, when you can't do something.
Yeah.
And that's what it looked like to me. He was like, nope, can't do that.
On the same stage, Alex Baudin, the EF Frenchman, who I think had designers on the KOM jersey, but he had, which he didn't get, but he gave some great quotes on Friday afternoon, basically saying he looked back and he saw Tadej Pogacar, who by that point had already dropped Vingegaard. I thought, I just want to see how fast it is. And so he jumped onto Pogacar's wheel and lasted, he said, 2 or 3 minutes, and it was incredibly hard work. But we then, I mean, there's not much more to say really, besides there being another 2 stages. But Saturday's stage was an absolute brute, 3 big alpine climbs. And Visma tried to unfurl a grand plan, and actually they did unfurl their grand plan, but by successfully isolating Pogacar, they just left him up to do his own job. So 12 kilometres from the finish, he was like, okay, then see ya. And off he went. This time, Vingegaard only lost 14 seconds, but Pogacar didn't need to take any more time, realistically. Pogacar then very generously let somebody else take the stage win on Sunday because he didn't want to get 100 stage wins 100 victories before the Tour de France. So
because he probably feels about the Dauphiné like Johnny feels about the Dauphiné, which is
I love the Dauphiné. It's just I'll wait my turn. Do
you know what? They probably don't. They've probably got T-shirts and caps planned for the 100th win, like Soudal Quickstep had for the 1000th. But they're not ready until the Tour de France.
No, it's because UAE Team Emirates are very environmentally conscious, so they don't want to waste the T-shirts they've already printed because
it's true.
That goes against the XRG philosophy.
There we go. Yeah. So yes.
Did we learn literally? I mean, we learned that apparently Tadej Pogacar is stronger than Jonas Vingegaard in the second week of June.
Right.
Yes. And one thing I think we actually learned, because we've still got 2 weeks to go. The third week of the Tour de France is different to any other week of bike racing. The comments from Tadej Pogacar at the end of Saturday's stage I thought were interesting, where he saw Visma trying to formulate their plan and was like, I needed to attack because I didn't want Visma launching all their attacks and trying to do their strategy against me. So what he's figured out is that what happened on that Granon stage where they, 2-punched him with Roglic and Vingegaard that's how to beat him. So he's figured out if he just attacks before they
by the time when he attacked,
then it's fine.
When he attacked Vingegaard, it was just after Kuss had attacked, and Kuss had already been in the breakaway. So he was clearly the first man to try and go on that last climb. And there was still Jorgensen and Tullett in the move, and it very light in the yellow jersey group. And one of them was probably meant to be trying to stay with Vingegaard to look after him just in case, which neither of them ultimately needed to do because Vingegaard just tried to follow. But those two were probably it was probably going to be Tullett next, and then that was probably the plan. But Pogacar just. Why not,
So what you're saying is that on that Granon stage, which for those who don't recall, this is essentially how Vingegaard and more broadly Visma beat Pogacar for the first time. They used Roglic, who was still on Visma at that point, to counterpunch. And so Pogacar has basically realized that if he just gets rid of the counterpunch first, or the punch first, I guess Roglic was the punch.
Either or, really, doesn't matter.
If you get rid of one of them, if he attacks early, gets rid of one of them, then he doesn't have the problem that he ran into. Now, the other thing that was relevant out of the Dauphiné is that there were no other riders sort of within striking distance, because the punch counterpunch only works if you have to follow the rider that attacked.
Yeah.
He didn't have to follow Sepp Kuss, right?
No.
Sepp was minutes back at that point. And so that is why they need, for that strategy to work, you need 2 riders within spitting distance of the lead, and with only Vingegaard really as the competitor, that strategy doesn't really do anything, because Sepp Kuss can ride up the road all he wants, and Pogacar does not care.
Well, that looks like the strategy. If Jonas Vingegaard can't arrive on similar form to Tadej Pogacar at the Tour de France, the way that Visma can beat UAE Team Emirates is probably by arriving with a team with more riders who can stay closer on the GC for longer, you'd hope. At least until you get to the Pyrenees, right? And you try and survive with the Pyrenees. But it's a long race. The way that Tour de France always works is usually the strongest rider wins regardless. Yeah. But what I will say, the difference between, we talk about how and at least in the past few years since the Chris Froome years, we've had the rider who wins the Dauphiné doesn't go and win the Tour. But the difference between the Froome to the Pogacar years is that Froome wasn't really up against another multiple Tour de France winner, right? Or at least someone who could beat him in an even contest. Exactly. It's not the same. So I would say that's the one difference. Rather than looking at, here we go, it's going to be a Tadej Pogacar Tour. I didn't come out of the weekend disheartened, which I felt it could have been easy to do.
I mean, I feel like, and it's easy to forget that. Well, it's not really easy to forget at all, but given that he spends so much time in other jerseys, it's sometimes easy to forget that he is the world champion. And if there's any year that he's really going to, not that there's ever a year he doesn't want to win the Tour, but you want to win the Tour as world champion. That'd be just really cool. So I expect he's going to, he's got something to work on as well, which I think is a good thing. If he was just going to try and stay steady or just try and find another 1%, that's harder to do than, okay, I've got to work on my TT, which he probably does after Wednesday, whether or not it was a pacing issue or whatever. But as for the others, I mean, Vingegaard has always seemed like he's not the guy who goes and wins everything on the way to a big race. Quite often, as you know, he has won the Dauphiné and then the Tour in 2023. But we've also seen him go to the Dauphiné, and basically allow a teammate to win, and to get some racing in the legs, to get some teamwork in the legs. That year that Roglic won with Vingegaard acting as lieutenant, coming second, that was very much a kind of dress rehearsal. This is how we work as a team in a big bike race. But he's also the sort of rider who I imagine almost in a slightly old-fashioned way, which I'm sure isn't actually accurate, but he's a bit more of a plug away and get things done and without too much flamboyance. Yeah. So I have a bit more faith in him finding another 1 to 5%. He's also, like you say, got the team behind him. I've got more faith in Vingegaard coming back and contesting and actually bringing something to the table. Unfortunately, I think Evenepoel's ceiling is going to be third again, which I'm not surprised to see. But he was 4.5 minutes down on Pogačar. He was struggling with allergies, which we've seen him struggle with before. He also seemed to be overheating quite significantly on Saturday. But it's that. And that sucks. That's really rough. But it's a form thing as well. And I think that is one major takeaway that I feel like will still be the case next month.
Before we move on to Evenepoel, can we talk about Pogačar's mind games quickly? Because that feels like another thing that he's decided to hone over the Dauphiné. At least after he had realised he'd probably won the Dauphiné, he was like, okay, what else could I do to prepare myself for the fight against Vingegaard? First of all, we saw him go to the car to collect bottles and gels for his one surviving teammate in that front group, Pavel Sivakov, who's leading, where it's like the GC group spread out. There's probably still 1 to 2 dozen riders left in it. And Pogačar just sails all the way up the group, hands the bottle over, and then just slots back in. When you see him do that, you must be like, okay, you are either the most foolhardy person ever, or you are on such form that this is ridiculous. We also saw him not contest that sprint for second.
Yeah, and didn't even look over at Vingegaard when Vingegaard looked over at him.
There was some people were suggesting that Pogačar was maybe trying to then give the green jersey to Van der Poel, because what happened was Pogačar and Vingegaard ended equal. Pogačar and Van der Poel, sorry, on the points. They were equal on points in the green jersey competition. So Pogačar didn't do enough because I think he won more stages. But you saw Vingegaard sprint, and then as he finished his sprint on the line, look over at Pogačar, sort of wondering why are you not sprinting?
Why did you not beat me?
So it's maximum confusion, which in the art of war, I think that's point number 3 or 4, I think.
Especially
so
after stage 1, when Pogačar of course won stage 1, but that was a day there was a big day for Visma and for Vingegaard, who was like, I can play this game too, but then it's kind of been turned on its head.
There is something that we talk about a lot in the 3-week Grand Tours versus a 1-week stage race, though, which is that all those little things start to add up. And so I think if you're optimistic, if you want to be optimistic about Pogačar not just riding away with the Tour de France in a couple of weeks, I think there's 2 things. One, is there a hint of overconfidence floating around?
Hubris.
And is he going to hubris perhaps? And keeping in mind that the first 9-10 days of the Tour de France are full of these kind of traps for hubris, where he could just expend way more energy than he ever needs to. He could attack at every single little opportunity. He could end up getting 8 seconds here, 10 seconds there, that sort of thing. he could come into the Pyrenees with a lead, but at what cost? I think that's one way to kind of look at it. And I think the other thing is, and here's a almost certainly wrong, but going to chuck it out there, knee-jerk hot take, which is that the Tour de France doesn't actually – so this Tour de France starts on July 5th. The actual Tour de France does not start until a month from yesterday, the 15th, when they hit the Pyrenees. And so it's a long way between now and then. And I think we would be remiss in our duties as hot take machines if we didn't mention the fact that he might have peaked too early, right?
I don't believe that can I don't think he has peaked.
Yeah, I think he's a superhero, isn't he?
I think that he's finally.
Like I said, I think almost certainly wrong. I think that will not be the case. But again, if you're looking for reasons to be optimistic about a tighter battle in July, I think those two things are what come to me, which is that Pogačar will Pogačar, which means he will waste a bunch of energy that he probably doesn't need to. And particularly if he's coming in overconfident or confident even. And the second thing is that, like the actual crux of the Tour de France is a long way away. It is 4 or 5 weeks away from today. And so that makes the sort of form of the Dauphiné even less relevant. As we talk about Evenepoel, for example, there's a lot that can be done between now and then.
Agreed. I think this has been quite a serious opening to the podcast compared to normal. But I think it's because I think the racing was good. I think it was amazing. Yeah. I think I saw some. Was it Tom Danielson who tweeted that both these riders turning up to the Dauphiné means we've basically had like a month-long Tour de France or like a 2-month-long Tour de France because we've been able to carry the momentum through now from the Dauphiné into the Tour. And I don't think it's a foregone conclusion whatsoever in the Tour. I mean, it could easily be, but we won't know that for ages. And to quote every single episode ever made of Netflix Unchained, those first 10 days of the Tour de France are not where you can win it, but what are they?
They're where you can lose it.
Indeed. Correct.
By the way, we are beginning recording of our Unchained binge podcast this week.
Exciting.
And so that will drop along with the show on July 2nd? Is that
I think so,
yeah. I did discover that I have a friend who I didn't realise until yesterday when we were talking about my work, that he listened to the Unchained Binge Pod. He's like, oh my God, I thought I recognised your name.
My
This is a relatively new friend, a dog friend.
Okay, fine.
It's like, that's, yes. So that was fun. But yeah, anyway, back to the subject at hand. No, I think that it's worth mentioning. I mean, we've touched on Evenepoel, but it's worth mentioning Florian Lipowitz, who was only added to the Tour de France one.
Liposuction.
Oh God. It's a rare demerit
that
for our friend Rob.
That team is fascinating to me.
It is, and Roglic is coming back for the Tour.
Roglic is going to be there. Yeah. He just
skipped the Tour de Suisse, which is hilarious. Probably a good idea given the weather yesterday.
And he just came off of antibiotics. He was posting on social media.
Didn't miss that.
And so, who knows how good he's going to be. Roglic's going to Roglic. I mean, based off of that Dauphiné form, you'd think that Lipowitz would be the leader of that team. But really, it's an interesting kind of like... We haven't talked at all about Red Bull ahead of this tour. But, it's still Roglic. And we still have third place at Dauphiné. And so, what are they going to do?
Well, Vlasov won't be leader for anyone else.
Yeah, Roglic, Lipowitz, Vlasov, because obviously...
And then the magician as well.
Yes, exactly, Martinez. They've also got Danny Van Poppel for the sprints when everybody else has fallen over, I suppose. Yeah. But,
and he might get a yellow card trying to make someone fall over.
This is true.
That could happen too.
But so it'll be interesting to see what happens just in the leadership situation there. And I suppose Lipowitz's job will be to stay with, because he started the Giro last year after doing a brilliant job at Romandy. And was really threatening until he got COVID, and then he was 7th at the Vuelta.
He's
and
good.
He almost got the red jersey, but Red Bull screwed him because they said no, don't ride. But then he kind of did. But then O'Connor went and got the anyway. But yeah, so that'll be really interesting, and it's nice to see someone new and someone kind of taking it to. He's not that new. This wasn't. It wouldn't be fair to say this was his coming of age because he's already finished top 10 in a Grand Tour for goodness sake. But he was like, this was one of the biggest start lists that he's been a part of, including that Vuelta probably. Yeah. It was good to see.
German cycling needs new heroes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, big time. With the Evenepoel, with him talking about his hay fever and how or his allergies, pollen allergy more generally. I don't know if you can use them interchangeably, but he said how he's suffered from all his life, and it used to be quite serious, and he used to have to inhalers for it and stuff like that. But you know what? I don't mind riders making excuses at all. I think some people,
especially when you can actually see it.
Yeah, and people lambast riders for this. Like Luke Rowe was talking about this in the interview we discussed on the previous episode, where it's like you literally say anything now as a rider, and people just absolutely tear you apart, which I don't agree with. I think it's better for him to talk about the problems you're having that are limiting your performance. But then when he says he adds stuff on top of it, like as well as the allergies, I think I was also being affected by the carpets in the hotels.
Well, if there are dusty carpets, then that is a thing.
It is a thing. I just feel like
it's marginal gains to the extreme.
I feel there's also like a level of things you can share and then things you can keep to yourself.
Fair enough.
I would not be like, the reason that I got turned over is the carpets in the Ibis budget hotel. I just desperately want to see pseudo quick steps some mechanics just ripping carpet out.
Having been in an Ibis budget hotel, I reckon that they're probably moppable. I mean, they're not carpets like your nan's wool
That's
carpet.
That's true, actually, a lot.
Yeah. I would imagine they're not the kind of allergenic carpets that you'd expect. Anyway.
Yeah. Anyway,
well, the bummer is you can't take anything for it.
Well, you can get a TUE, but
the real powerful stuff you can't even get a TUE for.
Yeah, ask Bradley Wiggins.
Right?
Really?
So
Yeah, because a lot of those antihistamines, like the more powerful end of the antihistamine spectrum, you could potentially get a TUE up to I don't know. You're not going to want to race on Benadryl or something like that anyway. So but it is. Who was I talking to? I was talking to a pro years ago who was complaining about this, and I think for Evenepoel, it's frequent enough. Maybe he'll go through the full TUE route, but it's relatively common that pros will have some sort of allergic reaction to something random, and they're not they're not medically prepared for it, right? They haven't gone and gotten the TUE. They're it's too late. Basically,
yeah.
And
that was Simon Yates' situation when he took an inhaler from the car and the doctor didn't do the right paperwork or something. That was remember his situation.
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
As a fellow hay fever boy, I can guarantee there are no performance gains from antihistamines. Guarantee it.
There's a lot of things on that WADA list that are questionable gains. Anyway, last on this list here, Kit. I don't know what this is. What is that? Kit's cyclingism bingo?
Oh no, so the Dauphiné, as we've discussed, is a great race, not necessarily something that people target. And with that in mind, and the Tour de France coming up, I think it must be maybe the single most day-by-day race, as in the most cyclingism race of the year, because they can't give anything away. And bless him, Evenepoel had some absolute golden nuggets this week. He said day by day. I mean, our friend Cosmo Catalano, how the race was won, put together a bit of a supercut of some of, I think it was mostly Evenepoel saying day by day, day by day. I think he said it 3 times in one sentence at one point. He also had a great description of one of the stages. It was up at the beginning, and then up in the middle, and then up again at the end.
Stage 8, I think.
Yeah. So it's one of those races where, and looking for good quotes after this race, everyone is saying, there's still time. We're going to go to altitude. We're going to get better. This doesn't mean anything for the Tour. Congratulations to Tadej for being good right now. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
Well done, guys. Thank you.
They're all going to altitude in the next 2 weeks, aren't they?
Yeah.
Which is also why none of them are racing Suisse, because it's too close. Yeah.
Well, they wouldn't race Suisse. Oh, yeah, that's yeah. I mean, it's also Suisse is infamous for bad weather, no? Quite often.
Yeah. It was horrible,
as we found yesterday.
We'll talk about that at the break. The Dauphiné, though, is one of the most enjoyable races I've been at on the ground, because it's like the Tour de France, but there's no one there. So you're just hanging out on nice mountains that are less busy than usual. The weather's it's not super hot yet. It
was this week.
It's great. Yeah, true. But
yes.
Nice that was the Dauphiné.
Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about this handlebar thing and widths and stuff. And we don't have Ronan here because he's currently 2/3 of the way around Ireland. But we'll do our best. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. All right, let's talk about this handlebar ruling. There's actually more to it than handlebars. So the UCI has been talking about this for a long time. We actually broke this story a long time ago about all the various things that they're going to try to do to basically slow the sport down. That's the idea. It's a safety thing, and they want to slow the sport down. And most of the gains in the last couple of years, at least, have been aerodynamic gains. And so they've put big focus on basically making riders less aerodynamic. And so a couple things, like they're gonna cap the rim depth, for example. I think it's 65 millimeters, which is it's pretty rare that anyone runs deeper than that these days anyway. They used to all the time. Like I remember they used to run. Anybody who was racing in sort of like 2010 was familiar with like a Zip 808, for example. Guys used to run those in sprint stages. Cav won on that exact wheel a bunch of times, for example. But they're not particularly common anymore. So in addition to the wheel thing, there's also, and this is the most controversial of all these changes, there's going to be new rules around the width of handlebars. And this is a big deal because one of the major ways that riders have found aerodynamic gains in the last couple of years has been narrowing that front end down as much as possible. Gone are the days of Tom Boonen winning Paris-Roubaix on 44 centimeter bars, for example. And there's some extreme examples of this. Taco van der Hoorn, I think, is one of the guys that's been all about this, right?
Jan Willem van
Schip. Yeah, he went even further. They get so narrow they're almost in a time trial position on the road bikes, and they claim up and down that this is perfectly safe, and they are full of shit. So there's some reasonableness to the idea that you shouldn't have handlebars that are barely wider than your stem, and there's also some reasonableness to the idea that if you widen riders, they get slower, they go slower, and that is in theory safer. That's the concept behind this. However, the exact widths that they've chosen and the way that they're choosing to do this are not really fair, not fair at all, particularly on smaller riders, and because we're talking about smaller riders, particularly on the women's peloton. And for those watching on YouTube, the new minimum outer width is 40 centimeters, which is actually quite wide. Like
that, yeah. You need to put it up against yourself, maybe, so we've got a rough idea.
I'm a sort of average-sized adult male, right? I'm like 5'11", 155 pounds. Yeah, and like. This is about as wide as I would race on, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're smaller than me, which is like 50% of the population of men and way more than
most
that of women.
The peloton, yeah.
And most of the peloton is smaller
than
me.
Yeah.
It's kind of a ridiculous number, and they haven't. So there's been other places in the UCI rulebook where they have made sort of carve outs for rider size. For time trial positions is the most obvious one. If you're tall enough, you get like an extra distance to the end of your aero bars. They haven't done anything like that here, and so it's basically what you're saying is if you are a smaller rider, you just cannot get as aerodynamic relatively versus a larger one.
Also, if your knee fish are black, you're doing this.
Yes.
So you're going to have to use your arms more than your core.
Yeah, and so Abby wrote a great piece about how this. There's actually been studies into this, which is that it's actually not only less fast, but it's also less safe and more tiring if your handlebar width is not correct. And if you've got small riders with narrow little shoulders, a 40 centimeter bar outside to outside is way too wide. It's like multiple centimeters too wide. And so I think the general consensus from most of the peloton, most of the pundits, certainly anybody involved in sort of like tech writing, and again, I wish we had Ronan here because he would hate this a lot more than I do, has been that this is sort of, I think, pretty poorly executed. That maybe the underlying concepts are somewhat sound-ish, but the execution on it has been really, really unfair. And I think that they will have to roll back some of this. I genuinely do, because, the industry hates it. The peloton hates it. Like, no one is in favor of the way that they've rolled this out. That said, some of the handlebars that people have been racing on are absurd, right? And that does need to be stopped. Not only because there's no way it's safe. I've ridden those narrow bars. There's absolutely no way it's safe. But also because it looks ridiculous. And as the person who has been a proponent of the Bernardino thumbs up, thumbs down, whether you get to race or not system of UCI regulation, it's just silly, right? So I don't know what the solution is here, and I realize I've been monologuing here for a minute, but I do know that this was not well done, and even just something as simple as taking that 40 centimeter number and making it 37 or 36 or something, or applying we're going to measure
shoulder width or height,
I'm not a doctor. I don't know what these things are called. These little nubs on the top of your shoulders, right? You measure the distance between that.
I think they are called the nubs.
The nubs. Okay.
Yeah, that's what it is.
You measure the distance between those, and it can only be like 5 centimeters narrower than that.
Yeah, but you know where that falls down is that you have this for when you're talking about the length of riders being how long then they can have where they can set the handlebars, stuff like that. You have riders already abusing that system by maybe increasing their height by 0.5 of a centimeter every year, because you just submit your height. And then oftentimes it seems the UCI doesn't come around with a tape measure, taking everyone's height like you're at school getting measured against the wall. So every single system that's put in, if it's not a hard and fast rule, is open to manipulation. So it would seem that anytime you do that sort of expanding and self-reporting stuff, there's always hiccups. But from Abby's piece, it's just...
Yeah.
When you have everyone so willingly on the record talking about something that's happened,
completely myopic, really. It's also slightly ironic that that Adam Hansen has been such a big proponent of this change when he was one of the, he was meticulously aerodynamic forward. Not that he was necessarily trying to use it to win all the time, but he was science first. He was a numbers guy. He made his own shoes. He was really into that side of the sport. And then he goes and says... there was also, just the fact that they seem not to really take into account or just try and BS their way through any discussion of the women's sport. And Amanda Spratt's point that she didn't see anyone measuring anybody around at the Tour Down Under, where supposedly there was only one rider from only one set of bars in the women's peloton that was already narrower than 40 centimetres, which, Amanda Spratt is one of the smaller riders, maybe. She's on the same team as Niamh Fisher-Black, but even Frank Vandenbroek, the chap who came second to to Romain Bardet, he posted on. He's really squeezing his shoulders together, but he's measuring. You can't, there's only so much you can do.
Yeah, manipulate the nubs.
His measurement was 32 centimeters, and he might be growing still. He might be growing still.
I love the phrase Adam Hansen makes his own shoes. That's such a great thing to say. You call him the
carbon fiber shoes.
The Geppetto of the Gruppetto.
Geppetto of the Gruppetto. But it's a kind of a fairly damning and a bit of a massive eye roll in the direction of the UCI, who's just kind of shot themselves in the foot, it seems, with this, because there, like you say, it is pretty much untenable, really, for a lot of the women's peloton, you'd imagine. And I bet Esteban Chavez would be a bit kind of out of his comfort zone on wide bars, as an example. Probably even Vingegaard, although he's got quite broad shoulders.
Is this the NBA-ification of cycling? Now it's just a tall man's game.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Philip Agana for the Tour.
Again, this is why I wish Ronan was here, because then we could debate this, because I am loosely in favor of things that protect the image of cycling, which is actually like written into the rule book. That is part of the goal of the UCI rule book.
This is true.
And so some of this is like, if you can figure out the right way to do it, I'm loosely in favor, right?
But it's like you've said, they already have something in place for time trials setups for heights and that sort of thing. So they've just got to use the same formula. Or a similar formula.
I just think that handlebars is maybe the wrong place to do it. Like I think that you could set a minimum width that is really quite narrow to prevent the sort of Willem van Schip nonsense. Get that stuff out of here, right? But like regular handlebars, the problem is the number that they've chosen is just regular handlebar width, right?
Yeah.
And that is fundamentally, that's why everyone is up in arms about it. If they had said no narrower than 32 or 34, very few riders are actually small enough to run a 30 centimeter bar and have it like be the width of their shoulders. Like there's
have they banned time trial helmets yet in road races?
That was
well, so this is in there as well, and I like this. I like this line that's in the new rule, which is approval of a quote, a distinction between road and track time trials on the one hand and road races on the other, with regard to the helmets that may be used. I don't know who wrote that line, but
probably Richard Plugger. It sounds like his sort of thing.
It is suitably opaque. Yeah, I mean, basically the idea is that they're saying that don't run time trial helmets in road races. How exactly you're going to enforce that one, I do not know, because there are no actual sort of. It's like a you know it when you see it kind of distinction, right? Like that there's no real distinction between a road and time trial helmet. They don't follow different certification. Again, what I come back to
is we
just need somebody who is the arbiter of good taste in the peloton, and they just get to thumbs up, thumbs down your setup. And if you look ridiculous, you get a thumbs down. And
I think you do it on you do it like a jury, like jury duty. So you get like a segment of the population, some of whom don't care about cycling, but you just are like, do they look too dumb? And if like Joe whatever off the street is like, yeah, that's silly, then they have to go and get changed.
I just got jury duty again. They always send me jury duty for the middle of the Tour de France, so I cannot go once again. And at some point, they're going to try to arrest me because I'm like, I cannot go. I'm not going to be in the country.
Three missed jury duties, and then you start pinging, and they come and collect you.
There are repercussions at some point.
Really?
Yeah, there are repercussions at some point. I don't really know what.
So next time you're off the podcast, it's like, Caley's locked up.
But I'm not going. So anyway, we don't need to spend too much more time on this. When Ronan comes back, I think we'll talk about this. I think we'll probably talk about it because Ronan's going to be at the start of the Tour de France. We'll have plenty of time to chat in the opening weeks when no mountains are happening. Chat about this sort of thing. But yeah, that's the update. So a new minimum width on bars, which is measured at two places, is measured on the outside of the bar and also measured on the sort of in the narrowest point on the inside of the hoods because people are tilting their hoods in. So
which is also those 2 points in the rules, been recently added to the rules, the angle of the hood, isn't it?
Yeah, well, so this effectively is a hood angle thing without being a hood angle thing, right? Because if you have an outside point and an inside point, that angle. Anyway, so we've got that. We've got the wheel thing. We've got a somewhat opaque helmet law. All of this is not coming into effect until the beginning of 2026, I believe. So there's some time to figure it out and potentially roll some things back or make adjustments. But there's been a fair amount of outrage, justified outrage, and I think that some other solution will probably be found. Because if you've lost me, and I hate this stuff, then you probably haven't quite done it quite right.
Abby's got a great piece on it with some quotes from doctors and physios, and there's a bike fit expert on there. So if you want to read more, then that's the way to go.
Look on the website.
Should we talk about Romain Bardet?
Yeah.
Let's. We got some news hits from this week. Basically, there's some things we want to talk about that we're not going to spend a ton of time on. Romain Bardet has been sort of retiring for about a year now, and he has been.
Yeah, it's accurate. Totally accurate. It was.
Yeah, it wasn't what you said; it was how you said it.
I wrote a story at the Tour de France last year about how he was, the last Tour de France stage of his or whatever. Yeah, it's been a while.
It was totally his doing. I'm sure he'd be perfectly. He'd sign off that quote from you. Yeah,
and I'm not necessarily saying it's bad. I think it's how I would go if I was him, right?
And finish at your home race. He was born and raised in the area of the Dauphiné. Started born in the town that Stage 3 started last week, Brioude. He was on the podium with his dad, which was ever so Bardet, ever so French, ever so Dauphiné.
You guys talk about Romain Bardet, and then I have a devil's advocate question to ask.
What do you mean?
I don't know what else there is to say about Romain Bardet that hasn't been said.
Well,
okay. He defined an era for the French public. I think him and Thibaut Pinot. You were either like a Pinot person or a Bardet person. They're very different personalities.
What's that distinction then?
Sydney,
Pinot
Melbourne.
was... Oh,
yeah, I was gonna say.
Fair enough. Edinburgh and Glasgow.
LA, San Francisco.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that's the.
Yeah. Okay. He had a great he had a great quote. I don't know if it was actually from this week or after last year's tour, but basically saying, it was right that he finished the Dauphiné. I think it was from this week because he was in the breakaway like 4 times and obviously all ill-fated, not just because Pogačar was there, but because we were talking about Bardet and a Frenchman at a French bike race, which we know that Bardet has had a not particularly great relationship with in the past, especially the Tour. But he said something like it was right that he was trying until the very end because he's been trying to be near the best without ever being the best since the start of his career. And the number of second places that he's had, including in the white jersey competition to people like Pinot at the beginning of his career, he's been that kind of the trier. And I think that's why a lot of people have liked him so much. And then it's why big fairy tale days like last year's Stage 1 of the Tour de France was such a huge deal. Doing it on terrain that was absolutely not for Bardet. Well, the stage up until the sprint finish was. But he was not meant to take the jersey on a stage like that, and he did, and it was the last time. And then he only wore it for one day, and he did it outside France, which was perfect, because Bardet has not had the most, cordial relationship in his latter part of his career with the Tour, but they're friends again, I think, and he's going to be on the moto at the
he will be
at the Tour for TNT Eurosport.
I'm sure he'll be good at that. So I remember last year when we were doing the Thibaut Pinot farewell tour, which I enjoyed very much.
The year before last.
Was it not last year? Was it the year before last?
Yeah.
Oh my
2 years
Lord.
ago.
He retired end of 2023.
That is so scary. That is so scary. Wow. Okay. Anyway, sorry about that. I remember at the time, Ronan again, who's not here. He's a bit of a Thibaut Pinot hater because he's always throws his hands up and is like, "What has Thibaut Pinot really ever done to deserve?"
Yeah.
The
tactics thing.
Why do we like them just because they're passionate? Guy.
No.
Well, I was going to say, if he's not a Pinot guy, would you care to guess how many professional victories Romain Bardet has had in his, let me see,
well, I know this
career?
Because I wrote an article about him yesterday, so ask Caley.
Yeah, Caley. What would your guess be?
In 13 and a half years.
It's probably fewer than I think.
Yeah.
That's the point of the question. So what were you going to say?
Like 3.
Oh, no,
okay.
It's more than that.
11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
11 is.
I could probably count at least half a dozen of those. So more than 3, obviously. I can see that. That type of rider, though, they just don't win. No. They don't win.
Well, that's why I included the second and third places he'd taken in the piece I wrote, because they seem more indicative of the kind of rider he was than the wins.
Climbers who are not the best climber don't win things.
Don't win anything.
If you're not the best sprinter, you might win off pure chaos every once in a while, right? But if you are not the best climber, where it is just an exercise contest fundamentally at the end of the day,
that's true.
You don't win things. My greatest memory of Bardet is, I think it's 2017, the year that he was knocked out of second by Rigoberto Urán.
Oh yeah, in the time trial, and he held on to the podium by 1 second.
By 1 second, and I there's an image from our friend photographer Christophe Ramon. So that day finished in a stadium,
Orange Velodrome.
Yeah, that one. And there's a photo, like they came like into the stadium, like through the tunnel, right? And then there's a photo of him sitting down against the concrete wall after this, and he had just been fighting that bicycle for the entirety of this time trial. I think at the time I gave him a bunch of shit for not, pardon my French, for not like practicing time trialing when you're a Tour de France contender, because he clearly didn't do much of that. Anyway, the reason why this one stuck with me is just that image, which was him. It was so Bardet, where he was out of his element because in a time trial he had fought, and he had barely hung on to what ended up being probably kind of his pinnacle. I think, other than sort of tour stage win here or there.
Was probably his best tour, but
17 was peak Bardet, right?
Yeah.
But it felt what it felt like, and one of the reasons, I think the reason why it stuck with me is it felt like his last best chance to do anything like that, and you could already kind of tell that he was maybe on the backside of that. It's that day and the way that he reacted to it really stuck with me. He's always been, I think, one of the most eloquent riders in the peloton.
Yeah.
Particularly when he's speaking in French, but even when he's speaking in English.
And writing as well.
And writing. So last year, again, this is why I say he's like Sydney versus Melbourne or whatever. Like, right? He's sort of leather jackets and coffee shops.
Black turtlenecks
And things like that. Last year, when I wrote that story about him, there was a quote, I think he said to French television, which was, "I was struggling against the voice in my head and the pain in my legs telling me to stop. I had some good moments. I was lucky enough to be caught by the best in this tour, like trains passing by and my story ending." That was the end of his last Tour de France last year. How many riders are talking like that?
That's like Abraham Lincoln in the Civil War.
I love it. And so I think that's what we're losing. I think that with Bardet retiring, I think that's what we're losing. Hopefully he sticks around in commentary. I think that'd be fantastic.
I think he's probably be pretty good. Although he would be on French TV, I would imagine.
He's going to be brilliant, I think, in commentary. Again, he's not quite as eloquent in English as he is in French, but pretty darn close. And yeah, he's just, it just feels like one of the last riders of a very different era.
Yeah.
And it feels like the closing of a book, so to speak, on that era and that type of rider and that type of athlete and the way that they approach the sport and all these things. And I think we're losing all of them sort of slowly, piece by piece, because he was like the marginal gains antidote for a decade in which that was the thing that dominated everything, right? And I always appreciated him for that,
did you
much
guys,
of the same reasons why I hate small handlebars.
Did you guys see that he's apparently, I couldn't tell if this was a joke or not, but Picnic Personnel presented him with a gravel bike as a leaving gift. But I couldn't tell it. Is he actually going to ride gravel?
Yeah, that's his plan. Yeah, he's quite good off road, and he wants to do Cape Epic as well.
Okay.
But part of his retirement statement last year was that he was going to go and do gravel for 2025 and 26.
Okay, fair enough. I guess that's good. I just my big question is whether there's going to be like a Picnic Personnel mechanic who's instructed to follow him around, readjusting his saddle height.
I mean, he's probably okay. It is pretty common that the Euros go over. There's a great photo from Unbound of Tim de Klerk walking down the trail in Unbound, and Josh, our colleague Josh, I think it's his photo actually, and he said that de Klerk was like asking them to help them fix his flat. Unclear whether he just didn't know how to do it or whether he'd run out of stuff, like run out of ways to fix it, right? Like out of tubes or whatever. It surprises
me of Tim de Klerk. He seems like the kind of guy who could
self-sufficient.
But at the same time, like a lot of these guys have been.
Yeah, no, I know.
They haven't had to change their own flats in
it's just surprising
20 years.
You have Geraint Thomas calling people out on that on his Instagram quite often, where he's on a train ride and someone will flat and then they won't know how to do it, and so he just videos them and mocks them. I'm pretty sure it's Geraint Thomas who does it.
I'm all for that. That.
Goodbye, Romain Bardet. It is weird though when these like drawn out retirements happen, because Picnic had him watching sort of like a "This Is Your Life" type montage, and like everyone giving their thoughts on Bardet, and it makes it feel it's a bit funeral-esque. Like,
it's like your own funeral.
Yeah, he's not dying. He's just like, he's 34 and he's decided there's more to life than riding Grand Tours.
Yeah.
So I find that a bit strange sometimes. Yeah.
Yep.
He is right.
It was the sort of reaction from the rest of the peloton, I think, was quite heartwarming.
He's obviously a popular guy, and it's not that surprising at all.
Yeah.
Chris Hamilton was Chris Hamilton was obviously, it wasn't just playing to the camera. He was in tears as he crossed the line yesterday. Yeah, he's like bosom buddies.
Yeah.
It increases my confusion around Picnic post-NL.
Yes. Have you seen the video?
Maybe decreases it. Maybe decreases it, because he was always the reason why I was like, this team gives me weird vibes, but also Romain Bardet seems like pretty normal, and so it didn't make any sense. But now with him gone, it's just weird vibes.
I think at this tour, finally going to pluck up the courage. I think we know Matt Winston well enough now, and we're familiar enough with him. I'm just going to ask him straight up, like, dude, what's going on? Like, can you just tell us, once and for all, whether this is a storm in a teacup, or are you guys nutters? Like, we need to know.
Yeah.
Let us clear your name.
All right.
There's just one more point. This is a very good chance that Bardet was just given his own, was just allowed to be Romain Bardet, and he was completely outside of the outside of the rule book.
I think he could be right.
But that would be very unpicked.
It could be like the Romain Bardet clause, and they've got a whole other separate dossier of how.
Warren Barguil asked for the Romain Bardet clause when he joined again.
We've got a couple of the news hits here. Sprinters. Who's good right now? Phillips just got beat by Magnier.
Phillips got beat. He didn't. I don't think he had an off weekend because he had a bad day on Saturday. Paul Magnier beat Alpecin twice. But yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, Van der Poel's good, but he's going to be on Phillips duty.
I really enjoyed Van der Poel just using the Dauphiné as a
training ride,
as a big training ride, and just being like, I'm just going to go up front here and just ride really hard. You guys are welcome to come. You're welcome to not. Whatever you want to do. I'm up here doing some training.
Yeah,
I really appreciate that perspective on the Dauphiné. From him.
I've got some breaking news via Dane Cash. He says, if you're still podcasting, the Dauphiné is apparently changing its name to the Tour Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes, which Dane, in what I won't repeat, says it's a very stupid decision in his mind. So no longer the Dauphiné, now the Tour.
Well, good luck with that is what I can say. People are going to still call it the Criterium de Dauphiné. I know it was the Dauphiné Libéré before, wasn't it?
Yeah,
and
which
it's still,
was
the French still call it that. Yeah. The French still call it that. Corvos still calls it that. But it's because it's got a slightly bigger footprint than it used to have. I think that it's going for the Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes.
It's not exactly catchy, is it?
Half expected them to be calling it that. Seeing that, it's like
that's just places.
They should call it the Petit Tour. I think that would be fun.
That'd be nice. To make it sound a bit like the Tour de l'Avenir, but
that can be
Avant Tour.
Anyway, sorry, I just thought you'd bring you that breaking news, which won't be breaking by the time this goes out.
Well, I'm with Dane that's stupid.
It's going to keep being called the Dauphiné.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we do change eventually, right? Like we changed with like Het Nieuwsblad, for example. We'll come around. We could call it En Loop, etc.
4 days of Dunkirk.
Yeah, 4 days of Dunkirk.
4 days of Dunkirk.
Still call it Twitter.
Favorite.
Oh, it's the best.
We should very, very briefly mention that Demi Vollering got beat for the first time this year, and then you should head over to Wheel Talk to get the full breakdown of how that went down. I think we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, the dog. Welcome back, everybody. A dog finished 13th on the Queen Stage of the Women's Tour of Colombia after racing the final 25 kilometers uphill.
Yes, that's exactly what happened. If you haven't seen the video on social media, it's in the Spin Cycle newsletter, Monday's one. And yes, there's this dog. Looks like a small golden Labrador that is just running alongside bike riders.
I think it's a mongrel, actually. I think it's a bit of everything.
Okay.
I don't think it's a...
I wasn't trying to get sued for defamation by the pure breed golden Labrador, so. But yes, the dog is just running up alongside riders. It's not the most dangerous dog in bike race video I've ever seen, which is why I think we can handle it.
Staying clear of them. It's nice.
A bit like it knows what's going on. It's running up and down. Looks very excited to be there. And just a fun video until you figure out that it had apparently ran alongside the riders for 25 kilometers uphill.
Which is wild.
Which is crazy, and finished 13th overall on the stage, which I'm not sure if that counts because the stage was 114 kilometers long. But it didn't really matter anyway because the dog finished 4 minutes back on the stage winner, so was out of the GC race. So.
And the race the fact that the race organisers embraced it was one of the best things about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I also wonder how no one managed to get the dog off the road for 25 whole kilometers uphill.
Yeah.
So maybe was this dog an industry plant from the Vuelta a Colombia Femeninas? Big if true.
Yeah, eyes on.
Eyes on. I think Ian in the off season I might request if he could do a history of dogs in bike races because there's been. Do you remember when was there a T-Mobile rider who crashed into a dog and the wheel buckled?
Philippe Gilbert did once, famously.
Oh yeah, there was a wheel buckling. Wheels used to buckle more often than they do today.
Yeah, and then but the dog then looked so ashamed with itself when I'm not even sure. Obviously, it wasn't the dog's fault; it was the owner's fault. But
I don't think he even hit the dog. I think he just like, in an effort to not hit the dog, turned his wheel sideways, which then folded the wheel over.
Yeah, but
and the dog knew. The dog just kind of walked away like.
The dog knew though. The dog knew that something had gone wrong.
There are some, I mean, it's not strictly the same thing, but there was an amazing photo from the where was there a time trial recently? It wasn't Tourist. Oh, yeah, it was the Dauphiné time trial. And Tobias Foss was in the hot seat for a while, and his dog was sitting on his lap. And usually pictures that are put on the internet, especially at bike races, are kind of cute and cuddly. But this dog is just kind of growling with its tongue sticking out, looking absolutely infuriated.
Really?
And it's just the most brilliant. I'll send it to you. It's very entertaining. It was one of my favourite dogs at bike races that I've seen.
I think that's the entirety of our C blog.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's so.
It.
Bit of light.
We're gonna head into After Dark. What should we tease for After Dark today? Our real opinions about Remco Evenepoel.
Sure.
I can tell you about lobstering.
Yeah, I'd like to hear some of that.
I can tell you about my.
Why don't you give us an appraisal?
Making.
Oh, chutney making. I'd like to hear about that. Why don't you give us an appraisal of what we did wrong in your absence?
Oh, there we go. Yeah. Live.
Why don't you
appraisal.
Give us a Chef Ramsay appraisal?
Uh-oh.
Pretend that we are a Mexican restaurant in Maine, and you are disgruntled with our.
Oh God.
With our service and cuisine.
Or a Mexican restaurant in the UK or Europe would be worse.
Same, but different. Yeah.
All right, let's hit it After Dark. As always, if you remember, you get to keep hanging out for another, some amount of time. I would be remiss if I didn't mention once again that our member purchase program, something you should go check out. We're adding new brands to it all the time. In fact, I can't mention the one that's about to be added. I think it'll be confirmed maybe by Friday's show. Oh. But this is it's an online retailer of many things. So you could get a significant discount on many things all in one place via this one.
Is it Amazon?
It's not Amazon.
Okay.
No.
I was going to say that could change dramatically.
Special Escape Collective member only pricing on this whole website. Yep. Go check it out. Sign up. escapecollective.com/join. Now's the time to do it, really. You're going to get all of our Tour de France coverage. You're going to get all of our tour dailies. You're going to get Unchained, Binge podcast, all that stuff. Actually, that's for free anyway.
Don't say that out loud. Pretend.
Sorry. I think so. The After Darks of the Tour de France are less about like our sandwiches and more about extra interviews that we do, other insight, some of the sneaky things we hear on the side that we maybe can't say outside the trust tree. Yeah. So you want to be in on it. You want to be in on the Tour Daily After Dark.
Yeah.
And the Tour Dailies, of course, are our daily podcasts. We run all through the Tour de France and Tour de France Femme. All right. That's it in After Dark. We'll see you all Friday.